Hey everyone. So we have a new friend, not new to me, but new to you guys. Thank you, Carmen.
Yes. Hello.
Appreciate you coming along. I tried to get her earlier and she was too busy, but we've managed to wrangle a few minutes here. Yay.
Yep.
All right, John, we're going from the end of chapter 7 through 10:42. So we'll start with John and then we've got a Second Chronicles 14 through 33. Nicodemus. Do you watch The Chosen?
I do. And it was funny because so much of this was like playing through my head as as I was reading. I hear the voice, so it's kind of fun. But I do appreciate Nicodemus's character. It just gives a whole new light, kind of a whole new spin on things.
Well, and people have different opinions. I know some people don't like the idea of a graven image, as in you're thinking about the person that's playing Nicodemus and the person and Jonathan Rumi that's playing Jesus. I can understand that. That maybe, but I think for a lot of non-Christians, it's very helpful. And for me, this one was interesting because this is the end of chapter 7:45. It's verse 50. Nicodemus, who had gone to Jesus before, and who was one of them, asked, "Our law does not without judge people without first giving them a trial." And I thought that was interesting because they do have in The Chosen, there's a whole section because Nicodemus does come to talk to Jesus. And the way that they set that up with Mary Magdalene was very, very cool in The Chosen. So hats off to them. But
Mhm. Mhm.
I found it was interesting because you do feel he's Team Jesus, but he's still trying to navigate all this stuff. I think he was trying to help him not be crucified, is my general read, even here, like without any of that other
Yeah.
stuff.
Like I see the validity of what you're saying. I don't know if I 100% align with it, but I'm getting there, but I'm not sure. It's kind of funny. I had a conversation with my husband last night because he's in the works in the government sector now versus just commercial. And I just told him I couldn't do that because I asked too many questions. Like I'm not a yes man, And I see Nicodemus here, and he's not a yes man. Like he's like, but why? And he's not afraid to keep asking the questions probably for decades have been pounded into him as a small child up through where he is now. And all of a sudden he's like, wait a minute. I see the validity of what you're saying, but it's like, something's not. So I can appreciate that about his character.
And because we're reading backwards, we actually haven't seen the scene where Nicodemus goes and talks to Jesus. That's in the Gospels, and so it hasn't come up yet. And it's kind of interesting. Like I said, I've always found this way of reading it backwards has been a blessing to me. It's sort of I look at things differently. I look at things from the other end sometimes. So this is a second, so everyone is aware, a second time that Nicodemus is mentioned, which we'll come to soon. But moving on to 8, the woman who got caught in adultery. We read the story, we see what happens. Jesus, what did he write on the ground? Right? Like, this is the question. And he wrote twice. So do you think he wrote the sins of the people standing there? That's always been my thought.
No, I mean, it's always, kind of been a mystery. What was so profound that they literally just, I'm out of here?
I think, like, adultery, Matthew, thieving, right? I'm giving obviously more normal names
Yeah,
than some of the
yeah,
people, but
maybe he just put it all out there.
like, and
Yeah.
they would have seen what he'd written. There's
Right?
and how many is there? 5 guys? 10 guys? Who knows, right? Like, yeah, I just have always thought that he did that, but that's just me. That's me supposing. It just says that all we've got is Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. That was verse 6. And then in 8, once again, he bent down and wrote in the ground. That's
So,
all we got.
what stood out to me is I've never seen this before. They began leaving one by one, beginning with the older ones.
Ooh,
Why?
yeah.
Why the older ones? Like,
Yeah.
what? Was this the wisdom kicking in? The wisdom of the elders being like, yeah, I'm not going to touch that. Whereas the younger ones were, still trying to kick it. And I don't know. I saw that and I was like, not
Well,
that I
and
have any more answers than I did, but
I think you do. I think you have a question. You have a and I this comes from Grady was on doing Job, and it is okay to ask God questions. It is, and this is where Nicodemus comes in the sense of there's a difference between, oh yeah, what do you think? Like, who do you think you are? Well, Lord, but who do you think you are, Lord? Like there's a tonal difference. There's a question of I don't understand this. I'm looking for answers versus, well, you don't know what you're talking about. kind of thing. And I think that question of, okay, well, why did the elder, there's something here. And that's the Bible. You've read the whole thing cover to cover once. Well, you missed a bunch. So you read it again and then you still find things. And I would
Right.
imagine you've read it
Absolutely.
quite a few times. And so it's like, I didn't see this before.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think I brought it up. I can't remember who it was, maybe Tim, maybe Dave, I don't know. But there was a whole section of where he tells them, and this would have been earlier in John, to eat his flesh and drink his blood. It's so hard. It's think
Right?
I would have been on that. Is Jesus Christ came? Yes. Is he born a virgin? Yes. He died? Yes. And then we have this ritual, which is a bad word in a negative connotation, but the idea of the metaphor for taking a piece of bread and wine, and it is for Christians, it's a very, very significant practice. It's a internal thing, this action, and yet it's like, what? Like, what? He says to the disciples, are you guys gonna leave me too? And Peter's like, where are we gonna go? I love that. But some of this stuff here, I am in the Father and the Father is in me. Retrospectively, from this perspective, we can look that way and go, oh, I know what that means. And
Right,
yet at the
exactly.
time, it
Yep.
was so confusing, so
Yeah.
confusing.
I would have listened to this and be like, this guy is a stark raving like lunatic. Like, what is he saying? You know?
Right.
And then so part of me is like, having read through the Old Testament and then I jumped into the New Testament. And I'm like, so much of, and we'll see this as we move further into John, is, the Old Testament was so black and white, like life or death, blessing or cursing, either with me or you're not. The law is death or you live. We have the law of sin and death. And all of a sudden, we have Jesus trying to insert a third option. Like, it's no longer just clean and unclean. There's grace. We have it's like the third part of the Trinity is coming into full effect. We don't have just option A or option B. All of a sudden there's but what about this? And what about that? And what about,
But
you know what I'm saying? Like all of a
yeah,
sudden he's
yeah,
trying to insert this third option into their way of thinking. And they're just like, what? The Sabbath isn't all or nothing? Like I'm jumping ahead,
yeah.
but you see
Well,
where I'm going with that? Like he's all of a sudden
totally.
just inserting this third dimension into their black and white, and they're just yeah. So I would have been totally confused. Like, I don't know, dude.
Right.
Like, what are you
Yeah.
saying?
Well, and oftentimes they have that spattered throughout, even in this whole section of John. I'll be like, some said this, some said that, because they didn't. People were talking to each other. You're listening to a speaker, someone teaching in the temple, even. So, and you turn to your friend and go, did you hear what he say? Like, right? This is what we're doing. We're talking about it now. Obviously, we're, like I said, retrospective here. We have the information. We can look at it from the things already having unfolded. But at the time, I'm sure I'd have been like, hey, Carmen, did you hear what he just said? What do you like? Really? Like I try to figure it out. Well, let's jump over there. In chapter 9, he heals this man on the Sabbath. And he knows it's the Sabbath and he does it on purpose. He
Mhm,
literally, I'm sure he does. It's on
mhm,
purpose
absolutely.
because people were holding up, this isn't more important than the Lord. This book isn't more important than the Lord. It's words on a page. And one of the things that came out of that Altered Bible interview that I did is it's a form of media, in quotation marks, right? So obviously Johann Gutenberg and the printing press and all that jazz, but this is still media. So it's the words. I believe Jesus spoke these words. Which exact words? Was he speaking Aramaic? Was he speaking Greek? There's a whole bunch of stuff around there, right? I wasn't there. I don't know. But I have the words, and the words are important, but they're not more important than he is. And I think that that's exactly what we're looking at here with chapter 9. The Sabbath is for you. It is a rest. It is on purpose. It is in the rhythms of life that God wanted for us. And yet
Mhm,
the Pharisees got to the point of where they were slaves to the Sabbath instead of the Sabbath serving them.
right. Yeah.
So you were talking about that earlier.
So they asked the question, was it the man that sinned or was it his parents? Like two versions. And he's like, actually, it's a third option. I'm doing this so that the Father can be glorified. So again, he's presenting it's not so black and white. Like there's actually a third option. Like, let me expand your horizons a little bit. So this is just another way that he did that.
Yeah. I really liked, and a couple of times, I don't know if it's in this section. Obviously, I read and record, and who knows if it's in this particular section. Anyway, this guy, he finds again in 935, and he says, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" And he's like, "Who is he?" Because he doesn't even know what happened, right? Because he can't see.
Right.
And
Yeah.
he heard the voice. He knows that this is the dude that healed him, but is this dude the Son of Man? And he said, You're speaking to him. And then he's like, "I believe." And he worshiped him. And it's that Jesus, he closes the loop. He doesn't just leave you, and then there's this furrow and the parents and him and yada yada. And then Jesus finds him later. Jesus heard that they had driven him out, and when he found him. So he still is seeking him, because that's what he
Yep.
does. He's the shepherd. He
Yeah.
seeks us.
Yep. We're not quite done. Let me get back to that.
Right? Right? So, do you have anything else in 9 before we move on to 10? So many of these stories are so profound in and of themselves. Just like the Old Testament, you have all this stuff. You have the so and so's and the so and so's beget so and so. And then in between that, you have like little tiny tidbits, some of which are in this week's reading, where you go, "Whoa, what happened? Like, I need more. What happened? I need more information." Right?
Yeah. I think for me that ninth chapter in John was just a whole the third kind of dimension of things, and we hear so much about that, the whole numbers, the Trinity. Jesus began his ministry at 30, he died at 33, he was in the grave and rose again after the third day. So it's all about this, like, you're right, it's all about closing the loop. But yeah, the law of sin and death, but all of a sudden then we have the law of grace and just how he is
He says, "I
yeah,
give you a new commandment." And yet some people get upset about that because he fulfilled everything. But I do think that the law was there to expose the sin, and we couldn't live up to it. Only he could.
right. Right. Yeah, and obviously you'll see that throughout the Old Testament just again and again and again and again and again. Seriously, you would think they would get it, but they didn't, and we still don't, you know?
Right. We don't. That's just it. We don't.
We
We don't
don't.
get it.
Ah, but that was kind of where I came to with the reading of John, just kind of the whole, like, we're no longer with the black and the white of the law. We've moved beyond that, and there's so much more, and it's just kind of cool.
It is. It is amazing. I'm going to bring something here, not contradictory to what you're saying, because I totally agree. But in 10:7, so again, Jesus said to them, "Very truly, I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep." And then down in 11, "I am the good shepherd. The shepherd lays down his life for the sheep." And then in 14, "I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me." Evidently, and I always say this, our comparison in the Bible to sheep is not flattering. They're so dumb.
I have goats. They're intelligent, but they are headstrong. They have a way about them where they will mess with something until they get it to do, what they want it to do. They get into trouble. They're known for getting into trouble. So
Interesting.
that's the
What?
goat thing.
And he says, "I am the gate for the sheep." And that to me is still the black and white part of the Old Testament. You
Yes.
have to
Yes.
believe on him. You have to.
Absolutely. Right. Right.
There's no other way through. He
Mhm.
is the way maker. He is the way, the
Right.
truth, and the life. So there's only
Right.
belief in him. Although yet I would hearken back to Nicodemus and I don't get this, Lord. Or I don't like eat your flesh. What? Yet, is he the Messiah? Yes. Do I understand everything? No. And would I have, had I been standing there? Probably not. But I'd have been like, I'm coming.
Mhm.
I think I don't. Right? And so much of this is, again, chapter 10, verse 24. "If you are the Messiah, tell us plainly." Jesus answered, "I have told you and you do not believe." He's like, "Dude, I've told you." And they ask at some point, someone says, "Well, give us a sign." And he's like, "Jonah
I
could
just
show up
healed the
and you."
dude. Like,
Yeah. "What part of this are you not? I am the Messiah. I'm saying it."
right? Yeah. Yeah.
A
Yeah, no.
Samaritan woman at a well who was a hoe. She had 5 husbands, right? She gets the news first. A woman, gets the news first that he is, "I am he. Give me this living water, Lord." And he says yes. And so they're like, "If you're the Messiah, tell us." I am telling you, and you're still not getting it.
Yeah.
But isn't that how we are, though? Isn't that like goats? Aren't we just
I think the temptation is the people who changed their minds had that personal touch. And
mm,
I think our mentality is until you touch me, until like seeing is believing. Like, I'm not gonna hearing isn't enough. I need to see it. I need to touch it. I need to feel it. And I'm wondering if that's kind of the crowd was like, I didn't touch it. I saw it, I heard it, didn't feel it, lack of faith. Um,
But
but their eyes weren't open, like, I don't know. I mean, we see that, like, they believed because their eyes were open, like, maybe their eyes weren't open, like,
I told a story previously about my daughter and touching the stove when I was right there, and nothing had happened. It was praise God, but she literally looking, don't touch it, made eye contact. She was about 3. Boom, hands straight in the burner. And I dropped the pan, threw her hand under the water. All good. We're fine. And there was no burn, literally no burn. Praise God. But after that, reflecting on that experience, oh, you are your mother's daughter. There's no question you are your mother's daughter because that's me. I got to go
right?
try it. No, that was
Yeah.
dumb. That didn't work. That's not smart. Don't do that, Beth. Like, ugh. All right. Well, anything else? There's so much in here, I feel like, and yet it's not so dense because we're getting smaller passages of the New Testament to read. But you have all these questions that you walk away with. Like 8:36, I'm just going to jump backwards for 1 second. So the Son makes you free. So if the Son makes you free, which he does, you'll be free indeed. And yet, freedom, especially in America, we have, I think, honestly, a warped sense of what freedom is, especially in the case of Christ. Hey, go be a hoe or go do whatever you want. There are rules and laws and things that will help you.
Yeah.
Speeding, right? We've all done it. We've all done it, even by accident. Somebody, you're driving along, you're learning to drive, you kind of, ooh, that was a little too fast. Now, usually you're not going 20 over when you're learning. You're trying to figure it out. You're sitting there at the steering wheel and trying to do all these things. But we've all been there and we've all been, oh yeah, I'm really in a hurry. I'll go 5 miles over. The whole point of that is when you have gone stupidly fast, you can wreck and you can hurt yourself. So I'm not endorsing government for any stretch of the imagination. What I'm saying is that what freedom is and what our concept of freedom is isn't always what we think of. It's like, oh, I can just do whatever I
Right.
want.
Right. Yeah, no, that's something that we teach very strongly in our co-op repetitively. Like, is the whole concept of self-government. Where the spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And if the spirit of the Lord is there, you're living by the fruits of the spirit. And what that means is I'm self-governing, I'm controlling my actions, I'm living out love, joy, peace. That's self-governing. And the more self-governing you have, the less external government you need. So that's a whole part of that what freedom is. Freedom is when we self govern, when we live by the Spirit of God, when we live by the fruits of the Spirit in our lives. That is freedom. That's where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And if there's not freedom, then, what's happening? Like, are we not self governing? Are we not living out what God tells us is best for us?
Right. And that's isn't that the whole thing? It's, well, no, I know better. No, no, you don't. But
Right.
go for it. And that's the Lord's attitude. And truly, with our children, within the boundaries when they're really, really little, they can try something. You've got them corralled somewhere. You're trying to do something else, like cook something where there's things that are dangerous, and they're on the gate like this. That's what we do as humans in terms of God. And yet he says, I put this boundary here to help you, dude. I want the best for you. I want for you to flourish and to be free, truly free. What does that mean? And it means that there are rules and there's a tree that you shouldn't eat from.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
speaking of, let's head over to the Old Testament. So we're starting in chapter 14. Yes, Second Chronicles 14. So we have Asa.
Good old Asa.
I went to Hillsdale with a boy named Asa who lived in Colorado.
Oh, there you go.
I'll have to look up Asa Florian. Anyway, chapter 14, Asa did what was good and right in the sight of the Lord God. And so seldom do you see that with the kings of Israel. There's like a handful, but he did.
Yeah.
So
So, fun fact, his name means healer. And I was like, for what he did for the land, that was very appropriate. And often you see that their name kind of predicts what's going to happen.
that's very true. I loved in this sums up what you were talking about in 15:8. When Asa heard these words, the prophecy of Azariah, son of Oded, he took courage and put away the abominable idols from all the land of Judah and Benjamin and from the towns he had taken in the hill country of Ephraim. He repaired the
Hmm.
altar of the Lord. He gathered all,
Hmm.
like he did the things. I think it was interesting in 12 where it says they entered into a covenant, and So often, the people of Israel, well, okay, Lord, I'm going to be right this time. And that generation does. But so often later on down the road, they have to make a new covenant. And God is never unfaithful. Never
Right.
breaks the covenant
Absolutely.
we do.
He's always there. He's like calling to me and I answer. I'm there, just waiting. I love how when he followed God's law, like he removed the idol worship, he fortified, he built things, which when they were in a season of rest, they did those things. They fortified, they built. And I was like, how often do we wait till we're not in a season of rest? We're in a season of like turmoil and struggle, and we're like, shoot, we need to fortify. Ooh, too late. That's just not something that we think of when we're in a season of rest. Like, I need to, you know, build up and, be ready for the times that are hard. It's hard to have that foresight when you're like, "Ah, rest."
You used to live in Colorado. That's how we know each other. And yet you've chosen to have more land and the goats and do a little bit direction of a little bit more homesteading and building and whatnot. I remember helping. I have to shout out everyone. I helped her move. So I packed boxes and she sent me to the storeroom and I looked around at all of her canning and her stuff. And I was slightly ashamed. I thought, oh my gosh, I am coming to Carmen's house when the apocalypse happens. And I say that metaphorically because obviously with the eschatology, I think it already did. But yeah. Anyway, Carmen is really good at homesteading. She's really getting there. She's really learning and doing. So
I'm an experimentalist. I try things just for the sake of I don't know what.
we have the Micaiah thing and the kings, Jehoshaphat and Ahab. And this is similar to what we just read and did in Job. And you get this little window. And from my reading of the Bible, Carmen, can correct me. I think it's the only other time that you see inside the window of what's going on in the courts of heaven, other than Job. And so
Yeah,
I think
and I read this and I was like, "Wait a minute, it happens again." So I that kind of took me by surprise. I missed this.
it is an interesting one. And I find it also kind of funny that he says to him, the servant, the messenger who had summoned Micaiah said to him, look, everybody's doing this. Like, you just join
Right?
in, just tell him
Just
yes.
do it. Yeah,
And
you'll
so
be fine.
then he says, as the Lord lives, whatever my God says, that I will speak. And then he does turn around and go, oh, yeah, go. And you think to yourself, you're like, well, you just said you were going to say only what the Lord said. Was the Lord sarcastic? I think it
Right?
can be. I think sarcasm can be taken too far. It really can. I think that there's a line there, but at the same time, he said the king knows. Yeah, go up and triumph. They will be given into your hand. But the king said to him, this is verse 15, how many times must I make you to swear to tell me the truth? But then he won't accept the truth.
The king saw right through it. He's like, "That's not the truth. Tell me the truth." And he's like, "Okay, fine. Here's the truth. You don't like that either, but here it is." So
And we're literally
it's so
echoing
comical.
Jesus and the Pharisees. Just tell us if you're the Messiah. I did. I told you I was the Messiah and you didn't believe me. Just
Right.
tell us. Here, right here.
Yeah.
The whole thing of the courts of heaven and this little viewpoint is so profound. Until a spirit came forward, this is verse 20. Until a spirit came forward and stood before the Lord saying, I will entice him. So oftentimes we think that evil can't be in the presence of God. Well, here's an evil spirit that's there and says what to do, and the Lord's like, okay, you're going to be successful. You have the permission. Which God is the ultimate judge. He is the one. He is the author. He is the one that can say yes or no. But it was sort of interesting. And then Micaiah basically he gets pretty hammered here. He gets slapped.
Yep.
Put the fellow in prison and feed him on reduced rations of bread and water until I return in peace. And Micaiah's like, dude, you ain't coming back.
Right.
Yeah. I also found that in the beginning of 19, King Jehoshaphat of Judah returned in safety to his house. And then he says, nevertheless, this is verse 3, nevertheless, some good is found in you, for you destroyed the sacred
Yeah.
poles of the land and have set your
Right.
heart to seek God. And that's the
Yeah.
key, is so often these kings, even Asa, didn't remove them. There's some that they're doing really well, but they still don't quite
Mhm.
always get it all.
Right. Yeah. There's still some outlying thing. And he had done so good. And then he goes and aligns with Ahab. And the guy's like, dude, makes God angry, but God's, well, you did this, so I'm weighing this in the balances and the good outweighs the bad. So it's kind of what it seems like anyway.
But this is the binary black and white that you were talking about with the Old Testament. We often think that, oh, well, I was good enough in my life. I did more good than bad, so therefore I'll be okay. And yet they don't know Jesus. And that is the crux of Christianity. You believe that Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. And he is the gatekeeper. He is the door. And oftentimes, well, yeah, but you don't really need Jesus. Yeah, I actually, in my personal opinion, you do. Doesn't mean I don't like you. Doesn't mean I want to hang out with you. Doesn't mean that I need to shun you or something just because you don't. There's plenty of people that don't believe in my life that I absolutely adore, that God has created and made fearfully and wonderfully. And yet I read this book. My belief says that that's the way. Jesus is the way. A hard
Yeah.
saying.
It's like in some ways it's more black and white than it was. And yet it kind of flips it on its end because I read this and he was good, but he did some bad things. But then God's like, but you did this, so I can't. He did that with Solomon, like because Solomon fell away. You have the splitting between Judah and Israel, and because he made the promise that the line of Jesus would come through Judah, he couldn't completely rip it away from Solomon and his family. So that's where we have the break of Judah and Israel. It's like, so you didn't follow me, but I made this promise and I keep my word. So I'm still going to allow some of it, but not all of it.
Yeah.
So, and we kind of see this here with Joshaphat, where he's like, you did the good things, but then you did the bad things. But then he keeps following God as far as like, he's setting up, he's implementing this back to this Mosaic law form of government thing where he's setting up the judges and the rulers to help keep the people in line. And when God says, he ends by saying, I'm with you because you're doing good.
I also found that trekking on through here, because there's quite a lot of these little nuggets, these little stories interwoven in this. I find it funny that they always say the letter. Like they even do this, especially with the Maccabees. They talk about, well, here's the letter that was sent. This is what it said. And they actually write the letter in there. I find it interesting. And I didn't know Elijah was a letter writer, but Elijah wrote him a letter. And this is over in 21 and before the death of Jehoram. And 22, we have Ahaziah. And I just wanted to highlight chapter 22, verse 7. For when he came there, he went out with Jehoram to meet Jehu, the son of Nimshi, whom the Lord anointed to destroy the house of Ahab. And that's a foreshadowing because we're reading backwards. So this is going to be coming, but it's quite a sensational story that will be read in a couple weeks. And there are connection pieces here where you think, oh, wait, Nicodemus. Hang on. I know that name. I know that dude, right? And when you're reading this direction, the front to back, you see it too. You see the story of the exchange with Jesus and Nicodemus. And in our case, then you hear Nicodemus again. It's like, wait, I know this name. And then one of the funniest things about all this for me is there are a lot of names in this book. There are a lot of, let me tell you, Jesus has this Holy Spirit helped inhabit my tongue for a little bit because not that I speak normally like that, but I was a couple times pause. Okay, Jesus, help read these names and stuff,
Right.
which we're about to
Oh,
get to. But so, and it is confusing. We all look at this stuff. We know names like Matthew and David and John. Those are common names in our vernacular. And yet Athaliah and Jehoshaphat and Jehoram and Jehu and there's so many that we're not familiar with. And yet Jehu, that's a pivotal dude. I'm not going to say important, but pivotal is basically what I want to say is there's a story coming because we're reading back to front. And then we have Athaliah. That's a spicy one.
whew, man.
The Queen
Yeah.
Mom. I lived in England for nearly 15 years, and I'm not a royalist, but I'm also not anti-royalist. I kind of think, okay, nowhere else has this in this fashion. Like there are kings and queens of Netherlands and Denmark and Philippines and things like
Hmm.
this, but England, they do it with pomp and circumstance. Well done, British Isles. And yet, this whole thing of a woman, the Queen Mom, Queen Elizabeth's mother, she lived over 100. I always letters. Speaking of letters, I was always like, did she write her own mom a letter? Because when you turned 100 years old, the Queen would write you a handwritten letter in England, no matter. And they have records of all this because of the NHS, the National Health Service, so that you get a letter when you're 100 years old from the Queen. I was like, did she write her own mom a letter? But this story of Italia is the original Queen Mom. I think she was actually nasty. Like, I mean, Italia was nasty, but I think that that's where Queen Mom came from.
Hmm. It could be. There were a couple in here that were mentioned, but she's by far the yeah, spicy.
right?
That's good.
Well, naughty, horrible, and
Right?
it's
I
it's Jehoiada, essentially, that who's the high priest, but he is the one
Mhm.
that helps manufacture all this, do all this, and get her. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
it
Yep. Yep.
your denouement of the story, to use a fancy word, is in
Yep.
13. Atalia tore her clothes and cried, "Treason, treason!"
Right.
And he's like, "Enough, you
Military
have me."
coup.
Right? Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. By the priests, which is
Yep.
sort of interesting.
Mhm. You have to
Like,
wonder if all along she was just, like, plotting, like, how can I inject myself, you know?
well, she's the arch villain, literally, when she saw that her son was dead. That's back in 2210. And then, of course, we have part 2 of Atalia, and so we have Jehoiada dying and becoming old, and then
Mhm.
what does the king do?
Yeah,
He
he starts out so good, and then all of a sudden, "Oh, never mind," you know?
right? Here we are again.
Pivot.
Ah, Joash doesn't this is 24, 22. King Joash did not remember the kindness of Jehoiada, Uriah's
Mhm.
father, had shown him,
Yeah.
but killed his son.
Yeah.
Ew. And then, of course, it bites him back in the butt. 25, his
Yeah.
servants conspired
Sure
against
does.
him because of the blood of the
Yep.
son of the priest of Jehoiada, and they killed him on his
That's
bed.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. Do stupid stuff, get stupid consequences.
Yeah. There's a lot of that going on, for
And
sure.
then all of what we're talking about is personified in 25:20. But Amaziah would not listen. It was God's doing in order to hand them over because they had sought the gods of Edom. So he does something dumb, but well, the dumber part is basically worshiping the gods of Edom, which is what God said not to do. And then he basically, between Israel and Judah, and of course, for us, as we're going backwards, Israel and Judah are already separate. We're coming slowly the other direction. But that was a big deal. That was a
Yeah.
huge deal.
Yeah. I mean, I look at how God approached him. He's like, "Why are you worshiping the gods of the people that couldn't even defend themselves against you? They couldn't even help the people, that you slaughtered. And now you're worshiping." He's like, What are you doing?"
It's straight up confusing. So you're gonna seek the people who you kicked butt because I'm on your
Right?
team.
Yeah.
You're gonna seek that God. That just doesn't make any sense. Whatever.
So Second Chronicles 26. We're back to seeking God. We're back to prospering, fortifying, digging wells. And like he's a great dude. And all of a sudden, boop, pride. And then he thinks he's better than everybody else, goes in the temple and does the things he knows not to do. And all of a sudden you go from being the highest of the highs to the lowest of the lows by getting leprosy. And you're literally the lowest of the low. You're king in title, but I mean,
Yeah.
that's that's pretty much it. Like it was instantaneous. There was no I'm going to take it away from you. He just boom, lost it.
Well, I find it funny because there was no mirror in there. He didn't necessarily see like, could see leprosy on his hands, but it becomes on his face, right?
Sure.
Mm.
Yeah.
But disease broke out on his forehead in the presence of the priest of the house of the Lord. But if you were standing somewhere and these guys are confronting you, right? There's 5 or 6 priests standing there, and all of a sudden the leprosy breaks out, and they're all like their faces are the
Yeah.
mirror. Like their
Right.
reactions of those 5 realizing that all of a sudden leprosy is spreading. Now maybe he started to feel it, I don't know. But you wouldn't see it, right? You couldn't necessarily see
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
But all of a
Yeah.
sudden the reaction of those, and then like you probably did feel something in his body, but all of a sudden then it's like, "Oh, okay."
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. What did I just do? And then the next chapter is like super short. He did right in the sight of the Lord, didn't enter the temple. People didn't follow. He became mighty, he died. Like the end. It's like you have all these like long, extensive chapters about all these people. They did the right thing, they did the wrong thing. But this guy is like, he did good, didn't enter the temple, people didn't follow God. The end. Like,
Yeah.
huh,
Yep.
huh.
Well, You wonder how many of them made it eventually in terms of, because they couldn't believe in Jesus. And yet these are all these questions about, the second death, and did they get a second chance? Were they preached the gospel to? We'll find out when we get to heaven. But it is interesting because he did evil in the sight of the Lord, so and so, and he did evil in the sight. And there's only like 3 or 4 occasions, maybe 5, where he did right. It's so crazy. And isn't that humanity, our inability to listen to the law, listen to the boundaries that are helpful to you, that allow you to have freedom.
Right. Yeah.
And then we have Hezekiah,
Who seemed
and
to do a phenomenal job. Like, I love this huge chapter on the building of the temple and the training of the priests and the setting up the rulers, and he's back to this like Mosaic rule again, where he's setting up the leaders and the leaders are training the people, and that whole like chain of command. He's like, I'm not just doing this all myself. Like, I'm setting up all the people to do all the things, and we're going to be successful here. And just the whole consecration of all the things and the building of all the things. Like, it's like his domain centered around the holiness, of the presence of God in the temple, and like building that up.
mm,
Yeah,
absolutely.
it's like that's where his focus was.
And yet the end, he gets, and I always find this, I've said this a couple times before, but Hezekiah shows everybody what's going on in his he shows everybody everything, and they're like, dude, that wasn't smart. And yet Solomon, and Tim and I talked about this, it's wisdom from how Solomon approaches it with the Queen of Sheba and showing her everything, versus Hezekiah when he's showing his enemies. And we'll get
Mhm,
there later
mhm,
on. But backwards, as in, again, so
right.
funny to me. I always sit here and go, yeah, you had to do it backwards, didn't you, girl? But and maybe that's one of the echoes of the kings of Israel of, do you have a life where Solomon was so faithful and so well, and then all of a sudden, oh, but honey, I just need a temple to so and so, please, dear husband, right? It's talked about in the New Testament. It says Solomon was led away by his wives. So he didn't do well the second half of his life. I think mine was opposite. Anyway.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by this chapter 29, like just the sheer multitude. Well, in the very last verse says it. The thing came about suddenly. It happened quick. So fast that like these people weren't even consecrated. They shouldn't have been taking part of these celebrations and sacrifices and all these things, but because they hadn't even been consecrated yet, which means they came in there, they did all the like this happened fast. And I have to wonder about why. Why was this like burning in him, and I have to do this and I have to do this now. Kind of like go big or go home. And he did all the things, and there were so many animals that needed to be sacrificed. They had to get in people that weren't even supposed to be doing those things necessarily,
Yeah.
um, to help them
You
with
do
all the
you do wonder about that. It's like, okay, they slaughtered 6,000 sheep. What? Like, how did you
right?
do, like, that's crazy. That's a lot of
Yeah,
sheep.
yeah. The priests were too few. They were unable to skin all the burnt offerings, so they had the Levites come help them.
Yeah.
600 bulls and 3,000 sheep and 200 lambs, and it just goes on, and it's just wow. He wasn't messing around. He's like, "Hey, we're doing this." And it happened quickly. And so I do like the part though where I think it's in the next chapter. So he invites, so it goes into the Passover. They hadn't been cleansed, but he prays to God. I'm sorry. They didn't have time to get consecrated. Please be merciful and gracious. It's like, our hearts are in the right place. We just ran out of time. Like, please forgive us. And God is like, eh. And it comes back to the Lord is merciful and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in love. Like it literally, it's right there. The Lord is merciful and gracious, slow to anger,
Totally.
plenteous in mercy. And then it gets to the whole part like he won't keep his anger forever. And I think that's where we find these people again and again and again. Like they get into trouble, they call out to God, he's there, he answers them, he helps them, and then they do something stupid and his anger is released and they pay for it, and then they call out to the Lord and he answers that. It's like but yeah, there's just something fascinating about this chapter. Just the hugeness of it all, you know?
Mm,
It was no small feat to
right.
gather the nations and gather the animals and consecrate the things and do the sacrifices and yeah. He was so serious about this, like, he's like, Passover wasn't even celebrated when Passover was supposed to be celebrated because they weren't
Right.
ready yet. But he's like, "We're
Right.
celebrating Passover, so, like,
Yeah.
we're gonna have to push the calendar back a little bit, but it's okay, we're doing this." Like, because it
Right.
hadn't been done the way it should have been done for so long, he's like, "We gotta do this." Like, this dude had a burning in his heart.
And we have to carry on here, but the end of Hezekiah's life is not pleasant. It
Right. Like, what happened? Like,
yeah. He's so fervent for the Lord that he's not gonna celebrate Passover when Passover is, and then he gets sick.
yeah, yeah.
It's sort of
Um,
weird, and he also is so concerned about himself, which is so weird from considering all that he did, that it's like, well, doesn't happen in my lifetime. It's like it's so bizarre to me, so bizarre that yeah. And then his son and Manasseh, you're struck by 29. For me, which is the last chapter that we read for this week, was 33. Manasseh is a
yeah,
huge story. This dude
yeah,
is the baddest of the bad. Like, and
yeah,
I echo with this,
yeah,
right? Because I didn't behave well. I behaved very well as a child, but then as I came of age, I decided to be wild and crazy. And he is super bad. And then he gets hooks in his mouth, carried off, right? And while he was in distress, this is 12:33. While he was in distress, he entreated the favor of the Lord his God and humbled himself greatly before the God of his ancestors. He prayed to him, and God received his entreaty. He's the baddest of the bad. He is like just absolutely thumbing his nose at God in the
mhm,
most obscene ways. And
mhm.
God, and then it says, and then Manasseh knew that the Lord was indeed God. And it's kind of like, did you not know that before? No, he didn't. He really didn't. He really didn't get it until then.
Yeah,
That's what had to
yeah,
happen to him.
right. Yeah, you see these generation, it's like these kids grow up and their king is godly and doing all these great things, and it's like, what happened that the kids just it's like if the pendulum is here, then it's gonna go here. If it's way over here, then it's gonna be way over there. And it's like, are the kids not like how is this not like scripture is very specific in like passing these things down to your kids to the next generation and the next generation. And it's like from one generation to the next, it's completely
Yeah.
I just wonder, like, what were they doing with the kids?
Right.
What were they
Well,
doing with
and
the kids?
and you have that as a parent. You try to think like,
Yeah,
am I leading
right.
my child well? Am I
Yeah,
trying? And some of us are prodigals, and we'll have Jesus tell that parable soon in the Gospels, but you have to do it. This is where I mentioned my child putting her hand in the fire. Like that. Yep, yep. I had to try that. I had to be a Manasseh. I had to do it that way.
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah,
just. But at the same time, if you knew he's returning to what his father Hezekiah taught him.
yeah, yeah. So it was in his heart. He knew it.
Yep, just wasn't doing it. Well, on that note, thank you so much, Carmen. It has been a delight. Maybe I can talk you into coming again.
Maybe.
Thank you, my dear.